Hello, my name is Cary Jensen, and welcome to CodeRage 10. This session is FastReport Beyond Basics, Essential Reporting Strategies. FastReport is the reporting tool that ships with RAD Studio and has done so since the RAD Studio release of XE2. In this presentation, I'm going to begin with a cursory introduction to using T-datasets in FastReport reports. I am then going to focus on the types of reports that are most common in business applications. These include reports that use grouping bands, reports that create summary reports, master detail reports, multi-page reports, reports that include subreports and charts, and mailing labels. That's the last slide I'm going to use. We're going to spend the rest of our time looking at FastReports and RAD Studio. This is the project that you can download. I have a slide at the end that I will show where you can go and get this project. This project has two design interfaces. There is a form where we can, when we run the form, we can click on buttons to display the reports at runtime. And I also have a data module. The data module consists of a number of client data sets. There are also some data sources here. The purpose of these data sources is not to display data in the user interface, but rather to provide for linkages between client data sets, so that, for instance, when I do the master detail report, I'll be using the customer client data set and the order client data set, and they're going to be associated by means of the customer data source. Over on my main form, I have a series of reports that I'm using as my examples. I also have a series of FRX dataset components. The FRX dataset components are somewhat similar to Delphi's data source in that it allows you to create an association between a dataset and data that you want to be able to display in a report. Let me show you how that works. I'm going to start by just creating a quick little fast report, and I do that by placing an FRX report component onto the form. I can then double click on the report, and that brings up my design interface. But currently I don't have any data to display, and the reason why is I haven't told the report about my data, and I do that by selecting Report, Data, and it'll show me all the FRX data sets that are in scope of this particular reporting component. So for instance, if I want to place records from the customer client data set, I'll select it right there. And once I do that, I can see fields available for placement onto my report. I'll just create an extremely basic report here. I'll say that I want to have a data set. It's going to be associated with the customer. This is actually a master data band, and that is an essential band in order to print data, one record per or one content of the master data band per record in the data set. I'm going to just quickly, for simplicity, say that I want to create a caption, and I'll drop down here my customer number, and I'm going to drop down the company field. And let's go ahead and make some slight adjustments here. And I've got those two fields there. I'm going to tighten this up a little bit. And when I hit preview, we'll be able to see the contents of that simple report. So just to repeat what I've done here is I have a FRX dataset that's pointing to a live dataset. In this case, a client data set. I've created a master data band that will print one record for each record in the underlying data set, and I have placed fields. Now there are two types of fields here. This is a simple text field that just really represents the text that I am displaying, and if I say I want to edit it, you'll see it's a literal value. That is my caption. This is a slightly different field. This is actually a field from the data set, and you'll see that it is enclosed in square braces, and that informs FastReport that I am going to be displaying information that is not literal, but rather has to come from a data set. In this case, we can see customer CDS, which is the user-friendly name of my FRX data source, and then company is a field of that is in the underlying data set to which that is pointing to. So Now when I'm done working with this report, I simply can close the designer and I have my report. If I open it back up again, the work I had done previously is already present. So let's get to the meat of this presentation. I'm going to begin by looking at grouping bands. So let's open up this report here. This report has a number of characteristics that are rather interesting. Like we had in just that example I showed you minutes ago, that there is a master data band, and this is going to print one record for each record in the underlying data set. I've also placed some a group header and a group footer. So these grouping bands organize the underlying data that is going to be presented. Now, one important thing to keep in mind is because these grouping bands are going to provide a structure for the display of the data, it's very important that the underlying data set have a sort order that is consistent with the grouping I'm trying to apply. Normally when you place a grouping band, you come over here and you select that you're going to place a group. A group header is the first thing that you're going to place, and it's going to ask which of the data sets are you selecting and which of the data fields that you want to group on. Then you can either do a data field or you can do an expression, and there's an expression editor that gives you support and provides you with access to many of the functions that are also present in FastReport. You can also specify characteristics of this group to indicate that you want to reset page numbers when the group starts over again, whether you want to implement drill down, which we'll talk about a little bit later, whether to keep the group together, and other settings like that. Okay, let's go ahead and remove that grouping header. So up here I have created my group based on an expression, and in this case the expression is the first letter of the company name. So that means I'm going to be grouping alphabetically by company name, where my first group will be companies with the letter A as their first character, and then companies with letter B, and so on and so forth. I also have a field here. This field also has an expression, and it is, as you can see, the first character of the company name. Let's go ahead and take a look at it so you get a sense of what that's going to look like. So here we have alphabetically and organized by first character, a nice little grouping report. Now when you have, you do need a group header in order to have a group, but you can also have group footers. Group footers are typically used to display information collectively about the group. In this case I'm displaying another expression, which in this case is it says records. That's literal, and then there's the square braces, which says that that's an expression. And in this case I'm doing a count, and one of the parameters that's required when you do count is which band you're counting, and in this case I'm counting the master data band. So it'll show me in the resulting report how many records there are in the A's and how many in the B's and the C's and so forth like that. So that's a grouping report. Let's go on to the next report, the summary report. A summary report is one that doesn't display individual records for every underlying record in the data set, but rather provides aggregate values for that data. This is a very common type of report in that I may not want to have many pages. I just may want to have summary data. And so I've done a few things here. I've created a report title. It's displayed once at the beginning of the report. I do have a page footer, and in the page footer I have an expression that includes some of the system variables that are available to you, including the date and time, so that I can show when this information was produced. And down here I have some simple literal fields as well as some expressions. This first expression is a count, and the count aggregate function can take one or two parameters. The first parameter is the data band that you want to be counting, and the second parameter is a value that indicates whether to include invisible bands and whether to restart the count on each group. You can see that if I go ahead and place one of these fields, we have system variables here, but if I select aggregate value, I can indicate which data set I want to do my counting on, what fields I want to. In this case, if I'm counting, then I could say my aggregate function is count, and then I can say which the data set. I don't have to count fields here. You might notice now that right now it says count and it's empty. I'll select the data band, so I'm now counting. That is the actual expression it's going to create. If I want to count invisible bands, then a 1 appears. If I want to create running totals, then 2 is my second parameter. And if I want both invisible bands and running totals, then 1 and 2 are added together to make 3. And that's how that expression was created. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete this because we don't need it. Let's look at another type. This is also an aggregate function. Right now you'll see the entire aggregate function is here. If I was placing a new field, I'd be adjusting it here, but I don't. Once we place it, it just shows me the text that was created. In this case, it's saying the maximum value. Again, notice the square braces so that FastReport knows that this is not a literal. And then I have my my orders FRX data set, and the items total is what I'm calculating the max on, and then my band that I'm counting on, and here I'm saying include invisible bands and restart after each group, but there is no group because this is in the summary. Now another thing we can do when we're creating these types of statements is we may want them to look nice. So, and that's where we come to display format. And here I've got a numeric display. Under format here, it just shows you some examples of formats that you can choose from. But notice you can actually come down here and edit the format string manually, and that's a nice thing to do. Now this is just one way that you can apply formatting. There is another way, and you'll see that here. And this is a little more complex example. If I select Edit, you'll notice that after, if you look over here, min, orders, items, and so forth, but right at the end I have yet another expression. Following the pound sign, I have a numeric expression, and that is indicating that's the formatting we can use, or we should use on this particular field. And when we go ahead and preview this, we'll see that both of those fields that I just showed you are formatted. And it's actually the same formatting I'm using. Just this top one is using the formatting defined within the expression itself. And this is where the formatting is applied on top of already a defined expression. Our next report type is Master Detail Report. There's two ways you can create a master detail report in FastReport. One is to create a denormalized table by querying your data and then using bands to represent the master detail relationships. For instance, you might have a query that brings together data from the customer and the orders table, where for each order the customer name appears over and over again. And then you would use a group header to display just the customer information, and then the master data band would be used to display the order information. And I'm going to show. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to do a master detail report where we have two linked tables. In this case, we have the customer CDS table, which is sorted by the company field. Then we have the orders table, which is sorted by the customer number, and it's linked through the master source and master fields properties to the customer client data set through this customer data source. What happens is as we navigate through the customer records, we get an automatic filtering of the orders to just the orders associated with the customer record that is the current customer record in the client data set. So what that means is that this master detail report is going to use two of the FRX data sets, and we'll see that when we open this up and view our report data. So we see the customer CDS and orders CDS, and we likewise see the data from those two different data sets over here. Now the primary difference between these types of reports is that your master table will use the master data band, and its immediate detail table will use a detail data band. And then you can have a sub-detail and a sub-sub-detail all the way to 6 levels of master detail relationship using this form of master detail report. You'll also see that I have a header here, and this group header is grouped on, again, I'm using the first character of the company name, and then I have something else that's kind of interesting here. I'm using a feature called drill down and expanded drill down. So with drill down, if you take this group header here, you'll see that I have a drill down property set to true, but the expand drill down set to false, and that the child property of this particular band is called child 1. Child 1 contains information including what looks like headers, column headers, and then it has the detail band and the group footer for group 2 as well. And the way that this drill down works is very interesting. Let me show it to you here by previewing this report. You'll notice that there's each of my customers, but we're not seeing any of the orders. We do see this that says click to see individual orders, and when we click, the child gets expanded, and this information is the column headers that we found in child 1, and then here's the detailed data for the detailed orders, and we can continue to expand these if we want for individual. Show you one more interesting feature that this particular report has. It uses conditional highlighting. I have two different fields of conditional highlighting here. You'll notice that some larger figures are being displayed in a slightly purplish color, and I have some other figures here that are being displayed in red. Let's go ahead and look at the amount paid field here and see how this is being done. Now over here, there's my expression, which is simply the amount paid value, but there's a highlight tab here, and I have an expression, and it says if the items total is less than the orders total, then I'm going to display in red. And I specified that by going into the font and choosing that I wanted to have a particular color for the font, and that's the sample that I get when I'm done. So when we look at the report, if I have a value where the amount paid is less than the items totaled, that means that we're still owed money, and I'm displaying that in red to highlight it and draw attention to that particular value. Okay, that's a master detail report. The next report is the MultiPage Report. And the MultiPage Report gives you the capability of having a number of different formats in a common report. Let's first go into the MultiPage Report here. And this looks like a normal report at first glance. The difference, however, can be seen up here in these tabs. There's actually 2 pages. In all of the reports we worked with so far, there's only been 1 page. And if I click on page 2, we'll see that there's yet a different report. Also, going to the report data dialog, we'll see that I have a couple of different FRX data sets that I'm employing from this report. And this is also, we see this over here as well. So the page 1 is a report that can have its own title, its own summary fields, its own page header, page footer. It's a full-on report in its own right, and it will be followed after the last page of the first report will be followed by the second report. And if you have a third report, it will be printed on a new page after the second report has been printed. This allows you to create very complex reports. In this case, I just have 2 tabular style reports, but we could have one page that was a tabular style, another page that was a summary report, yet another page that has graphs and images, and then another report after that, and they could all have very, very different layouts, but they are consistent. Not only are they printed together, but the page numbering will be consistent. So you'll notice that on page 2 and on page 1, I have a very similar page footer. So when we go to preview this report, it looks like there's page 1 of 4, 2 of 4. Now here's the next report. It starts on page 3, and it continues the same page numbering. So again, these are very easy reports to create. In order to create an additional page, you just come up here and say you want a new page, and it brings up a blank report, and that's where you can start adding your report title, your page headers, your page footers, your master data bands, your detail bands, your headers and footers as necessary to create your new page. And that is a multi-page report. The next report is a sub-report. Actually, this report has sub-reports and it also has charts. So let's take a look at this report. It's a much more complicated report in many respects. Sub-reports are somewhat similar to multi-page reports with one very, very important difference. The individual sub-reports don't appear on their own individual page necessarily. That's the way a multi-page report works. With sub-reports, you can have sub-reports specifically placed in particular bands, and that those sub-reports themselves can have you can have them side by side. You could have and that makes for some very interesting capabilities. When you go to place a sub-report in your FastReport project, what happens, and notice I'm just about to place one here. Actually, let me place it. Let's place it somewhere more interesting. Let me place it right here. We get a new page. So it's very similar to a multi-page report in many respects. The important thing, though, is that sub-report will actually be printed at this location. Now, let me get rid of that because that's just going to cause trouble if I don't do that. Now, so here's one sub-report I placed. There's another sub-report. Let's go take a look at the first sub-report. Okay, well, it's going to display information about employees, and the second sub-report is going to display information about customers. And if you look at their placement, you can see they're side by side. And when we preview this, you'll see that we get quite an interesting display of data. Now, that data is being displayed within a master data band, but that master data band, this is really interesting. This master data band is not tied. Unlike our other master data bands, it's not tied to a particular field. If I bring this dialog box up to edit my master data band, you'll notice that I have it as set as not assigned. And I have number of records set to 1. In other words, I only want the master data band to be printed once. If I had it hooked up to the customer table, we'd get these two sub-reports over and over, one for each of the customers' records in the customer's table, and that's certainly not what we want. An important thing about a sub-report is that you don't want to place anything if the sub-report is dynamic. That is, that if its size is based on the number of records in the resulting data set, and those number of records can be different at different points in time, you don't want to put anything beneath a sub-report in the same band, because what will happen is the sub-report will expand dynamically to display all the records within its associated data set, and it'll actually overprint the other any other content down there. And this is one reason why this band is using a child band. So this master data band is going to expand automatically to accommodate the longest sub-report that it appears within it. And then we have the child band below it, and that child band will be pushed down in order to make as much room as necessary for the longest sub-report in the band above it. This report also demonstrates the use of a Tchart. Tchart is the charting tool that's been available in Brad Studio since the beginning, or since the very early days. And what we have is the ability to embed our Tcharts within our reports. You edit these Tcharts with an editor, but the editor isn't nearly as strong as the editor used for the VCL Forms Tchart. So I'm going to come back to that in a minute. I do want to show you that in order to use the Tchart components within your report, you are going to have to add the FRX chart object to your within scope of your report. That's going to be necessary. Also, depending on the version of RAD Studio that you're working with, you may have to compile a couple design time packages, because they give the support for Tchart. And there were some versions of RAD Studio where both FastReport and Tchart didn't shipped with the product initially, but it was a download that you could get to. It was within a couple weeks of the release of Red Studio. Any case, as I said, the editor for Tchart is far more like a object inspector with expandable properties, but it's not visual and graphical like the VCL Tchart. However, the properties are all the same. So if you want to create a nice chart inside your FastReport, my recommendation is, if you're not real comfortable with Tchart, you might want to actually design the chart using the Tchart component on a VCL form. Then what you do is you look at the DFM file, and there's all the properties laid out there, everything that needs to be set, and you basically take that information and duplicate it by editing this object inspector like interface. But the really nice thing is you have a lot of charting options. So actually, let me go back in there again and say I want to add a chart, and there's all these different types of charts. Pie charts, line charts, bubble charts, bar charts, and so forth. It's very, very powerful, and the result is fantastic. So that's a very nice chart that we have here inside our report. Finally, you may notice that I actually have. I need to get rid of this page. Delete, but we do have this this final chart. So this is not only this chart or this report not only has subreports and charts, but it also has multiple reports. This allows you to create some very fancy reports. The last kind of report I'm going to look at is a mailing label, which is really kind of a mailing label is a specific type of multi-column report. Other types of multi-column reports might be conference badges or business cards or anything where you have multiple columns where you have data from a data set typically repeated over and over again, but it not only goes down the page, but it snakes across the page as well. In order to create a multi-column chart, what you do is you need to bring up the report options dialog box, and you can do that by just double-clicking on a report page, or you can right-click and select Edit, and that brings up the same page options dialog box. So this first page allows you to select your paper type, but when you go to the other options, that's where you see the number of columns, and you can specify information about the borders and so forth of those columns. Now there's one interesting, really interesting final piece about this particular report, and that is the underlying customer's data set has an optional address to field. Typically when we print mailing labels, if there's no address to, we don't want a blank line there. We actually want to close the, we don't want to display a blank line at all. We want to have a continuous looking mailing label, and in fact that's exactly what we have here. Notice here under this Erica Norman entry, there's actually 6 lines, but most of these mailing labels have 5 lines, but occasionally you get one with 6. And we need to be able to, and that looks right too, doesn't it? So how did we do that? Well, in this case, what we've done is, there was a number of ways, but this was kind of a really nice little example. We're using one of the FastReport functions, the immediate if. And in essence, the immediate if just extends from here to here. And it's saying, if the address to field is blank, then we display address 1, and if it's not blank, we display address 1, carriage return line feed, address 2. And to that, I'm concatenating another line feed where I put my city, state, and zip, and another line feed, and then the country code. And that produces that end result. There's only one thing that I want to warn you about, because when I was first making mailing labels in FastReport, I got really stuck because when you place one of these FRX memo view objects, it only places it at a line like that. And when I went to print, it just didn't look right. And you can see I'm missing a whole lot of data, and I was like, what in the world is going on? And then it turns out that by default, the FRX memo view has a stretch mode setting of don't stretch. So there's 2 things you can do. One, is you can say, okay, well, take as much room as you need, and this works out fine. And the other alternative, going back to this field, and if I just squeeze it back up the way it was, I can set stretch mode to SM actual height or SM max height. And what it'll do is it'll actually naturally stretch along with the word wrap. So that's where we get the result we have here. So these are the typical reports that you find in business applications. I've shown you a variety of techniques. There's some other things that I didn't actually discuss, but that you will find if you poke around in these examples, you'll find and can learn quite a bit about. It's really nice. This is a very, very powerful reporting tool, and it's one thing that I will say is this is the version of FastReport that ships with Rad Studio, and we've been able to create all those fantastic reports without having to upgrade to the professional version of FastReport. However, with the professional version of FastReport and on the higher versions, you get a lot more features, and those are things that you're going to have to consider. In many cases, it's very much worth your while to upgrade. It allows you, when you upgrade, it allows you to have event handlers that trigger while the report's being created, and allows you to do some very, very fancy data manipulations and property manipulations of objects while the report's being printed. You can also, some versions of FastReport allow you to let the user design their own reports, and that's certainly a feature that a lot of developers like, giving the options for their customers. Thank you very much for joining me today in this look at FastReport. You can download the slides and the sample code in both Delphi, Object Pascal, and C++ from jensendatasystems.com/CodeRage X. If you need to get in contact with me, my email address is cjensen@jensendatasystems.com. Our website is jensendatasystems.com. You can see my blog at caryjensen.blogspot.com, and you can follow me at Twitter. My handle's @Cary Jensen. Thank you again for joining me on this presentation, and I look forward to the upcoming question and answer session.
Okay, fantastic, Cary. Thank you for that great presentation.
I see there's a number of questions here. Some I've answered online, but they're certainly worth considering. I may have answered one of these a little wrong, so or not wrong, but I may have misunderstood the question. Going to start and look at these questions one by one. The first one was, the question was, is it possible to generate client data sets inside the report to enable report-specific querying of data from a database using a predefined dataset provider? And I kind of assumed that question was asking, is it possible while the report is running to get data into client dataset? And I replied that if you upgrade FastReport, you can add event handlers that execute during the preparation of the report, before and after the printing of various bands and so forth, and you could do some extremely fancy things there. And so I said, yeah, you could do that if you upgrade. However, there's a possibility that the question really was, can you use client data sets in conjunction with FastReport reports? And of course, the answer to that is very much yes. My examples all used client data sets to get their data, but so I'm sorry, Willie. I just really don't entirely understand the question. If you want to ask a follow-up to it, I'll be more than happy to try to address that. The reports that I was showing in this presentation, though, were all done with the Embarcadero version of FastReports, and it is very, very powerful. I've been able to create most of the reports that I need on a daily basis without having to upgrade. But if you want to do some fancy things like having some complicated logic execute during the preparation of the report, during the printing of the report, then you'll want to upgrade. Also, if you want to allow your customers to design their own reports, that's also available in the upgraded versions and not in the standard Embarcadero version.
Okay. That's great. Yeah, it's great. You can do so much with the the standard version, the Embarcadero version, but then yeah, there's a lot of cool things you can do in the upgrade as well.
Oh yeah, you have some really powerful stuff. The report server and the like in the more advanced versions. And I have to say that I think excuse me, I think FastReport is the best reporting tool I've seen for Delphi developers. It really is very, very nice. The designer is exceptional. You have the ability to zoom in and to really blow up the screen big so that you can do fine tune adjustment of the location of your components. There's guidelines that you can place that allow you to line up objects that are in different bands and quite distant on the designer from each other, but make sure that they line up properly. It's really, really a nice thing. And then it also supports report inheritance. So you can create base reports that have descendants and descendants from there so that you get this kind of a full framework of reporting that you can leverage in your applications.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you a question here.
Yes.
Let's see. So some people are asking about the crystal reports to converter to fast reports.
Yes, I've never worked with that, and I will say that these converters are designed to, now I haven't tried that particular one, so there may be limitations I'm unaware of, but most of the converters that FastReport provides you with will take the structural aspect of the report, the bands and the individual data-aware fields, and will reproduce that structure for FastReport. However, any kind of logic you have that's working behind the scenes, that's just not possible to duplicate that. So to the extent that your report is structurally based, the converter should do a pretty good job of getting you most of the way there. To the extent that you have code logic that's executing during the printing of the report, or other kind of report tool specific features that your report uses, that you're just going to have to reproduce by hand.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's one of those things to get some of the heavy lifting done for you partway there, but
that's right, and that's the purpose of the converter, to get you as close as possible and then let you take it the rest of the way. So there is a converter for crystal reports. There's a converter for quick reports, and there's I think there's a couple converters for some of the other commercial reporting tools. And since they're all supporters of Delphi, I don't want to mention them by name. Just there are other converters.
Yeah. Is it
Here's a nice question that I have to say I don't know the answer to. How do you prevent report printing if no records are selected by the report? Well, the only thing I can say is that you, as the Delphi developer, if the user says, I want to print this report, and you go out and execute some queries, because you do have data sets typically that are associated with the FRX dataset components. So you may have a FireDAC query out there, you may have an ADO dataset out there that you've executed. You can actually test to see if they have any records, and if they don't have any records, don't try to attempt to print the report. I mean, I could see that. Now, if the report itself is doing any kind of filtering, then you don't have that kind of option. But I would say that the first thing I would do is make sure that the data sets that I'm supposed to be printing actually have some data in them.
Yeah, that's good advice. It seems like I remember a long time ago doing a project, and we had some sort of logic in the report that checked to see if the data set was empty, and if it was, it displayed no data to be printed or something like that, a little message. Otherwise, people just sit there forever waiting for it to generate the report. Can FastReport do a report that is 4-up, that has 4 pages on one sheet of paper?
I don't know. I haven't. That's a feature I'm not familiar with. I haven't seen anything where where you can, for instance, scale down the report itself. So you could. My answer is I don't know. I certainly haven't seen where that is. I haven't seen where that's a capability, but I just don't know.
Now, here's some questions about FastReports with FireMonkey on other platforms and stuff like that. Have you looked into FastReports on FireMonkey?
I have not used it, but all registered Delphi developers can download at least in the previous versions. I haven't gone and looked for it for Delphi X Seattle, but yes, there is a FireMonkey version of FastReport, and it's a download from the registered users page for the Embarcadero edition. And then, like the VCL FastReports tool, there are upgrades for that version as well. I haven't used it, so I can't address that, but it does exist.
Oh, okay. Good to know. I remember them talking about that coming out, so that's exciting. I've seen that all reports are named untitled.fp3. Is it better to save them by name in order to launch at runtime?
I would certainly give all of my reports a meaningful and descriptive name so that if you give your users the opportunity to load the FP3 files, that it's very clear what it is that they're selecting. So I would save them with a name, with a meaningful name, yes. And I've seen a lot of instances where those reports do have meaningful names. And by the way, that reminds me, I just don't know about there was an earlier question that said that the FastReport demos folder was empty. I have seen a very sophisticated FastReport demo for Rad Studio, and it has a series of FP3 files, a large number of them, that it loads on demand when you select to see a particular demo, and those files also have meaningful names. So I would look for that, and I don't know what the one question that said that demo folder was empty. I don't know how that is. I have seen the demos though. And I didn't do any kind of special installation either.
If they are empty, you could get them from SourceForge or, if you are running into empty, I didn't see that question, but if you do see empty ones, let us know. We'll help you track them down because there should be, some demos in there. Can we separate your report design layout outside of the XE? Say you have an FR3 report, which link with a client dataset. If you want to add an additional summary field, can you edit the FR3 report from outside the exe and have it displayed on the report when the exe is launched?
Wow, that's kind of a nice question. Yes, there is actually. Well, this is difficult. I truly believe that that is absolutely possible. That you could have the the report definition, design it outside of your application, modify the report definition, save it, and then have your application, when it's launched, load the report definition and display it. I don't see any reason why you couldn't do that. You would not be able to do that with the Embarcadero edition because it doesn't come with a standalone report designer, but some of the other subscription versions, I'm not sure which version is. There's a very nice on the FastReports. By the way, FastReport is the tool in Rad Studio. FastReports is the company that created FastReport and FastCube and other tools as well. And FastReports is 2 words, and FastReport in Rad Studio is a single word. The company that does FastReport has a very detailed site. That's where you can download additional demos and get information, and including the feature matrix on the various versions of FastReport. And I would take a look there to see specifically which version you need to get to that standalone report designer. I see a question: is it possible to combine separate reports into a single print job? The only way I know to do that and have a common page numbering is to make a multi-report report like I demonstrated. If you're talking about merging them in, or just saying, okay, print this report, now this one and this one and this one, and you want to have consecutive page numbers that as the first report finishes, the next report continues the page numbering, I'm not sure that is possible. there might be a workaround to be able to do that, but I'm not sure that's possible. But if you're talking about just having multiple reports together, the multi-report is the way to do that. And if you don't care about the page numbering and you just want to say, here's 5 different reports, go print them, then programmatically you prepare each one and send it to the printer. And you can do that without any kind of user interaction. There's methods to suppress the print dialog. There are properties actually. There's properties to suppress the export dialog as well. So just programmatically, you can spit out, report after report. Without a whole lot of trouble. It's really quite simple.
Does FastReports include option to export to PDF or other file formats?
Absolutely. It's so easy. It's not funny. You just drop a PDF export component down on that same on the same container that is data module or form that the FastReport's on. Actually, it might need to be a form, and it will expose in its previewer menu and export to PDF. You can add. There's a number of export components, and simply by putting them in the same scope as the report, you can print that report. That gives the user the option of printing the report from the previewer. And as I mentioned, there is an export dialog that you can suppress, and you can print those PDFs programmatically without any user interaction, if you like. But it's just requires you to add the appropriate export component from the FastReport's tool palette, or from the tool palette that of FastReport's components. If you give me a second here, I think I can bring up what page that might be on. Let's see. I'm actually in FastReport 5.0. Okay, good. I'm inside an interweb application right now, so I wasn't sure if I'd be able to see that. So there's FastReport exports. Okay, so there's in the Embarcadero edition, you have PDF, HTML, RTF, BMP, JPEG, TIFF, GIF, a simple text report, and comma separated values export. And just add those, whichever kind of export you want, to the same form that your FRX report is on, and you've got it.
Wow, that's great. How about creating reports dynamically, programmatically without the designer?
It's completely possible. You need to be comfortable with the creation of bands and how you parent in the various components into the objects, but you can easily create new objects, and you can easily get a handle to objects that exist. I didn't bring it up in my presentation because the presentation was only 30 minutes long, but I believe it's the banded report. The very first report asks you what title you'd like to use. If you click on the button to print that report from the demo, it'll ask you what the title is, and it'll actually grab hold of the title component, which is actually a FRX memo view, and it changes the value of the title. So you can get hold of anything, and you can actually add and remove. So it is possible to completely create a report on the fly programmatically.
Great. Can you save and load reports from streams so you can put them in a database as blobs?
I don't know because I haven't tried it. I would imagine that you can. The people at FastReport seem to be serious developers who understand the needs of developers in general, database developers, and I'd be very surprised if you couldn't do it. It's just something I've never tried. I've thought about it a lot though, because I'm assuming I could have a report output to PDF and grab that as a stream and do whatever I want with it, but I don't know for sure.
Okay. It seems like I've done that before, but it's been too long, I can't remember. Is it possible to insert PDFs into reports dynamically?
Good question. I know that you can display images, but a PDF is a very special type of image. Again, I do not know. I would say probably not.
Lance just commented that no.
Yeah, that makes sense. I've done, especially recently, I've done some work with PDF, and it's just not, it's a very specialized format, and so I'm not surprised. Thanks, Lance. I appreciate that reply.
Let's see. The FastReport version for FireMonkey did not make it possible to create reports on Android or iOS. You can, however, create a report remotely using a server version of FastReports and download it as a PDF to your device. Yes, that's true.
Yeah, thanks, Thomas. I appreciate the input. That's great.
Let me think. I think we're caught up here.
There was one complicated question here. It said, using the event system or the script engine, are you able to retrieve page coordinates of data or field regions being printed? Specifically, this writer would like to have handwriting recognition regions reporting back to the main application. These regions would move dynamically depending on the available data. Wow, that's a nice question. I don't know the answer to it. Let's see. I really don't know. I shouldn't. I don't want to get your hopes up, but I don't want to dash them either, because that's a very complicated thing. And unless I had need to really get in there and do something like that, I just haven't had any experience with it. I believe that there is a place where you can post questions on the FastReport's website. So I'd go there and see if you can find where they have their support desk and see if you can have your question answered there.
That's good suggestion. Yeah, for anybody that had questions that Cary wasn't able to get answers for, that'd be a good idea.
Yeah, this is a huge product, and it's very, very capable. So, I know that it's not nice for me to say I don't know, but like I said, I don't want to get your hopes up, and it would be inappropriate for me to say, definitively one way or the other when I really just haven't had the experience with that particular area.
Okay, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's better that you tell people how to get the answers than give them the wrong answers, I guess, right? All right. Well, I think we're out of time. Now, was a comment about your Delphi Developer Days coming up, 2016.
Yes, Bob Swart and I are preparing our agendas and looking at our dates. I believe that we are going to have a number of dates in April and May this year, so it's going to be a similar format as the years past, and we'll be announcing those dates in November. By the way, there was a question here that just got posted. Is it possible to print the total number of pages a report has on its first page so that there is any first and second run model? Yes, there is. This is actually, you can specify 1 or 2 passes, but in order to do what you're asking, get those totals on the first page, I believe is going to require you to maintain a variable and programmatically update it. And I don't think you can do that with the Embarcadero edition. I believe you're going to have to upgrade. I might be wrong on it. There might be a way to do it, but I do believe that that's one of those things that might require an upgrade to the professional edition or higher to achieve.
Okay.
Fantastic. Well, Jim, it's been a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.
And thank you, everyone, for all the questions. These were some really nice, challenging questions this time.
Yeah, good stuff.
And you got a great talk coming up, so I'm gonna say so long from Costa Rica, and we'll listen in on the next session.
Fantastic, great, thank you so much, Cary.
All right, Jim, take care.
Bye.